Hi everybody, this is your instructor Don Carlisle. Just wanted to take a minute here and talk a little bit about our analysis writing assignments. These are very, very important and a very large part of your grade. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes here and talk about them and show you some of the examples, or at least the formats that I have here that I think you should certainly keep in mind as you're writing these. So first of all, you never want to do these at the last minute. These are designed to really think about it in a much higher level. These are conceptual in nature, and many of them, they're not here to do math exams, that type of stuff, but they are to really think about the material and hopefully analyze it, come away with it, understand these things better. That kind of is the point here. So this is very different than, say, reading a book and trying to solve a problem as far as GDP is concerned, if you're in macroeconomics or microeconomics, where you're trying to find, profit maximization or something else. This is really thinking about something from a little bit of a higher level, really trying to be applied and think about economics in a different way. Okay, so having said all that, we always want to make sure that we plan a little bit before we actually start to write, and we also have to make sure that we understand that analysis writing assignments really are not discussions in its typical sense. They are under the discussions tab in Canvas, but don't get the two confused. A lot of a lot of instructors in general will use discussions as kind of an informal place for students to kind of get together and talk. And we have some of those in the course, just not nearly as many as we do for the analysis writing assignments. Understand that the analysis writing assignments really are there to expand our knowledge and for us to do some formal writing here, and that's really our point, and that's what we're really trying to go for. So to that end, remember, I kind of have this written down here, and I really want to make sure you spend a little bit of time reading this, understanding it, and make sure you ask questions before we get started. But you really want to try to keep three things in mind when you write here. So first of all, we want to use plain language. We don't want to get too fancy here, but we do want to use terms, right, that we are learning in the class. That's completely okay. But we do want to make sure that we have, straightforward writing. We don't want to be too flowery, et cetera, et cetera. We also want to avoid some of these other things like literary devices that you might use in an English class, like metaphors or similes and that type of stuff, or anecdotes. Storytelling is not what we're really looking for, so be careful there. We also want to be careful about conciseness and the clarity of the language. We want to make sure we describe ideas clearly and accurately. Remember, as the instructor, as I'm reading your material here and grading it, I'm really looking for kind of two main things. The first one being that I see clear evidence that you've either watched, read, or listened to all the material that I assigned and that you understand it. And so if your language is really kind of all over the place, I miss a good idea of, oh, does this person actually really understand the material? So make sure that you're concise and clear, and that'll really help you. The other one is that make sure that you're making those connections between empirical evidence and economic theory, which is really what we're trying to go for. The other one is, and this is probably the super important one, is that we always want to make sure we use evidence-based reasoning. Remember that we are in this course and we are trying to do this off a rational, reasoned argument, one that's using economic theory specifically to make these distinctions. And so it's not enough to talk about personal beliefs. It's not enough to talk about personal opinion, just your own ideas of how they kind of come together, or your own personal observations that may or may not be correct. We really want to dive in and talk about these issues through this empirical evidence. The other thing that's really important to understand too is that, this is the whole reason why we're in the class. A lot of these things, a lot of these ideas, especially in economics, are not intuitive. They're counterintuitive. And this makes sense, because if everything was intuitive and we could just understand these things, then we wouldn't need to take, a lot of these economics courses or any courses in college. We would just know what they are, and they would not. We wouldn't need to do that. And so having and going through a course is really about going through these ideas and understanding that a lot of these ideas are counterintuitive, and we have to learn things before we can kind of get to that end understanding of what we're really looking for with education. All right. So that's really about it. The other thing I wanted to talk about here is the paper outline. So I already have this open in another format. Now, this is not a required format for your writing in your analytical or your analysis writing assignments, but I highly, highly suggest it. When we look at a kind of standard 5-paragraph essay format, which is what this handout is, and if you're looking for it, it's right here in this paper outline. You can download this as just a PDF. This is just a fantastic format. Now, this is kind of a standardized format, and it works in lots of different areas, but I can't stress this enough, that this format is like tried and true. It's one of the best ways to get across ideas, and if you get used to writing in this particular format, it's going to serve you well in just about any discipline. So this is really the idea. I would even suggest, for some of you, is to actually print this page out and take notes as you're actually watching the material, and this will help you greatly to kind of get this center idea down. Because what we're really shooting for in these analyses is you really want to try to have an introductory paragraph supporting paragraphs and then a conclusion. Now, the difference is that you may do in this particular writing, maybe for English class or something else, is you may spend some time actually setting up the argument or setting up the discussion. That's one thing we don't need to do in this class because we've all just watched the same material, so there's no need to summarize it or recap it or anything like that. You really want to go straight into your analysis. So there's that. The other thing, another little tip there that you want to be careful of, and some students do this, is they put a works cited at the bottom of their post. No needed. That's really not needed. The only time that's needed is if you actually use material from the outside of what I have assigned, or from your textbook, and then you're going to want to bring in a works cited. So if you really found this article, or you remember seeing a news article in the newspaper or something that you thought, wow, this really makes my point or has some good evidence in it, then yeah, bring that in, talk about it, make sure you put a citation underneath there, because we're all going to want to know, hey, what is this? Where is this article this person's talking about? So that's really about it. And the only other cautionary tale in there too is that if you do get information from the outside, make sure you spend your time covering the material that I've assigned first. Remember that you're being graded on your analysis of the material that I've assigned. So if you go and grab a bunch of information from the outside, I can't really tell, did this person actually watch the information? Did they understand the information first? So make sure that you spend just enough time going over all the material that I've assigned first, and then grab stuff from the outside to either support your argument or do something else. Okay, hopefully that's helpful. Again, you really want to try to be clear in your prose. Make sure you use evidence-based reasoning. A couple other things we want to be careful of is, we don't just want to recap or summarize the material. You really want to try to find your own evidence in there and kind of go from there. A lot of times I get students that ask me, hey, do you have an example of good writing out here? And I don't, mainly because, again, what I'm trying to do, or what we're trying to do with this particular assignment, is for you to understand in a conceptual nature and be able to apply some of this reasoning in a new and novel way. And that is the whole reason that's our goal in this class, is to teach you some of these skills and some of these ideas that you can use them on the outside in ways you may have never seen before. And so the idea here is to really try to think about them, and for you to try to express what you're learning here. A lot of times, if students kind of look at that, they think, oh, I'm learning a format, and that is not what we're doing here. We're not learning a format. We're really trying to learn information. And so to that end, we may use some formatting to get there, or to communicate those ideas. But in economics, there is no standard paper that gets you an A. There's many standard papers that get you A's. And really, again, the main idea is for you to be able to communicate those ideas, the key takeaways. What is it that we're supposed to be learning here? Why is this important? All of those ideas we really want to kind of get in there. Alrighty, hopefully that's helpful. Let me know if you have any questions or if this video doesn't make sense. I try to do these every semester. I create a new one. Sometimes I feel like I do a better way of communicating than others, but I'm always tweaking this assignment and changing it up a little bit. So I really appreciate feedback from people. Let me know, and certainly take a little bit of time and explore some of these resources that I have out here. I think it'll really be helpful, at least as far as trying to really understand that. Alrighty, and then also too, just another side note before I leave here is that during the first assignment that we have, the first analytical writing assignment, my grading is very light. I'm not nearly as specific, or I'm very lenient is the best way to say it, during that first set of grading. So don't freak out if you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I get this right. Do your best, try your best to kind of get that formatting out. I think when you get in there and you can look at what other students are doing, that'll be helpful. Gives you kind of a reference point for all that stuff. And anyway, put all that together, I think it'll be helpful. One other quick little note that I should mention here too, and then I'll be all done, is that analytical writing assignments, you cannot see other people's posts before you post your own. That is on purpose. If you were to actually, I've seen sometimes students will put a blank post in there to read other students' material. That'll actually get you an F. So you definitely want to be really careful with that. The whole idea is understanding that you really need to post your work first, and then you can see other people's responses. I kind of liken that to an analogy that if we were in a live class and all the students had gone to the front of the class and turned in their papers, and then a student comes up and kind of goes through them, looks at them, oh okay, and then comes back and then submits their own. Basically, that's plagiarizing, cheating, and that's as close to that example as you can get. So be very careful about that. Just one last little note. Again, I'm not expecting that too much, but it just seems like every semester I always have a student that either posts and then it's really tough. I don't know if it's an accident or not. The student claims, oh, it was an accident. I have no way of guaranteeing that, and it just basically I'm kind of left with only one option, and that is to give a 0. Anyway, so hopefully all that makes sense. Again, let me know if you guys have any questions. Okay, thanks a lot.